Coodati Station is a 2,000 hectare property on the outskirts of Mataranka and home to the O'Brien family. They have developed a successful cattle stud with planned grazing of more than 30 paddocks. The holistic management approach is based on the understanding that cattle can be managed in a way that improves country.
Planned grazing is simply having the animals in the right place at the right time for the right reasons. Cattle improve country by pretty much acting as nature's gardeners. By grouping cattle together into one large mob, their hooves act as little mini ploughs, and their bypasses are your natural fertilisers. But the secret is how long they stay on country. And so by grouping them into a small mob, we're intensifying their efforts, and they're grazing and browsing a whole blanket of country. So they're not selectively grazing and putting undue pressure on individual plants. And we move them on to a fresh block of country quite regularly. And so that gives every individual plant sufficient time to regrow and develop its root base and proper plant structure.
The O'Briens develop 2 grazing charts each year, one for the growing season and one for the non-growing season, and identify where cattle will be at certain times, how long they will be there, and where they will be moved to based on required recovery periods and length of dry season.
During the growing season, what you're trying to do is prune the grass and stimulate it as much as possible to grow a huge big bulk of feed for the dry season.
Fast growth means shorter grazing periods in each paddock, and slow growth means longer grazing periods. So monitoring growth to adapt the plan is vital. It's harder to damage grasses that aren't growing because the root mass is not affected. The priority during the non-growing season is to make sure the soil is covered and cattle nutrition is adequate. Soil cover is achieved by attracting cattle to sites with lick or water to knock the grass down.
When you come to the dry season or the non-growing season, one of the first things that you do is you assess how much grass you grew, and you can calculate then what feed you have for the coming dry season. And so early on in the piece you can determine, okay, how many mouths do I have to feed? How much do I have to make sure I've got to create a ground cover? Do I have to get rid of some early or not? Do I have to adjust? So that early assessment and constantly looking at your country and breaking it down to as much as an animal square per day, what bulk of feed do I need to sustain one animal for one day, and calculating that out. You know pretty early what your season might look like.
It can become a social decision whether to move the cattle through each paddock once or twice during the non-growing season. When the O'Briens first arrived at Coodati, regular fire was taking its toll and reducing the diversity of the desirable grasses, and a lot of grasses were stagnating and dying from overrest.
Those big perennial grasses were grey and oxidising, and if you went into a grass clump, it would all just cave away in front of you and you wouldn't see much life. Whereas if you go into any of these dry season clumps of grass now, yep, they might be a big body of grass, which is not a bad thing whatsoever, but it's not grey, it's not brittle, it will decay by the animals knocking it down onto the grass, protecting the soil, building our soil cover and humus, and mulching the soil and fertilising it that way, as opposed to when it's staying upright, then the only means of decay and decomposition it has is a very slow oxidisation process. It needs to come in contact with the soil to speed it up and actually be a win-win. That build-up of humus and carbon in the soil can only be a good thing, and it can only mean that we're going to be able to absorb much more rain and get a response from a smaller amount of rain much quicker, and we're already seeing that happen. Everything that we're on about is trying to build soils and start from the ground up, and so we're definitely trying to keep fire to an absolute minimum, and preferably not at all. I guess you could say that it's a constant trial, but it's something that's so important, end result, that you've just got to keep tinkering at the edges to make sure that you're getting there. And because what works here mightn't work next door, because our hole's different. We've all got slightly different means of which to work with than where we want to go. So there's your constant feedback loop to see whether you're going in the right direction towards our desired future resource base, which is that healthy, diverse, perennial grassland system with good water cycling, good ground cover. I guess the constant challenges with such a system is making sure that your water's right and working it out. But it's just something that you've constantly got to be doing, and the benefit is that you're getting to see your cows every day.
The plans can be organised to reduce effort at mustering time and find time for social events. Planned grazing has also allowed the O'Briens to more than double their carrying capacity to an average of 400 head compared to what would be expected under set stocking.
You're growing more grass, but you're also using all of your grass as opposed to just using a very small amount around your watering points. You're suddenly using your entire property. It's very satisfying knowing that you're improving your country, and you can see that your country's improving, and it's very satisfying to be able to see a calm group of cattle that you know exactly where they all are and what they're doing.